Amara's life took a dramatic turn when she lost her parents at a young age in a tragic car accident. With no family members to care for her, she was placed in an orphanage, where she spent 3 challenging years. Life felt bleak until Grace and Henry, a wealthy, down-to-earth couple with a compassionate heart, walked into her life. When they adopted her, Amara's world transformed completely. Becoming the daughter of billionaires, Amara found herself in a world of comfort and abundance. Grace and Henry were keen on teaching her the value of humility, always emphasizing kindness over wealth. They kept her adoption private, believing in the power of quiet generosity and wanting to shield her from any judgment or unwanted attention. For Amara, their loving support was all she needed. Growing up with them gave her a sense of belonging she had longed for. When Amara moved out to begin her own life as an adult, Grace and Henry continued to expand their business ventures abroad, traveling often but always staying close in spirit. Their love had given Amara confidence and resilience, shaping her into an independent young woman. Yet, as she ventured out on her own, she had no idea that she'd soon meet someone who would become both a source of joy and heartache, a man named Daniel, whose family's acceptance of her would prove to be anything but unconditional. After moving out of her parents' home to start her own life, Amara found herself immersed in college life and enjoying her independence. She was focused on her studies, determined to make a future on her own terms, but fate had other plans. One day, she met Daniel, a charming, cheerful young man whose genuine kindness drew her in from their first conversation. With his easygoing nature and sharp wit, Daniel had a way of making Amara feel comfortable, as if they had known each other forever. They first crossed paths in one of their shared classes, where a simple conversation soon turned into hours spent together studying, laughing, and sharing stories. Amara was captivated by his warmth and openness, qualities that felt refreshingly sincere. Over time, their bond deepened, and it wasn't long before they officially became a couple. For Amara, this was her first real experience of being in love, and she cherished every moment with him. Although Daniel came from a wealthy family, he never made a big deal of it, which only made Amara appreciate him more. They seemed to balance each other perfectly, with Daniel's light-hearted spirit matching Amara's quiet strength. She felt secure and accepted in his presence, and he reassured her often of his love and commitment. As they continued to grow closer, Daniel became a central part of Amara's life, making her feel happier than ever. She felt as if she had finally found someone who understood and cared for her deeply. But despite the harmony in their relationship, Amara couldn't ignore a small, lingering worry about meeting Daniel's family, knowing their values might clash with her own. Still, with Daniel's support, she held on to hope that love would bridge any gap. As their relationship blossomed, Amara and Daniel felt their connection deepen, and after 4 years together, Daniel proposed. Amara was overjoyed and thrilled to spend her life with him, yet a shadow of uncertainty lingered in her heart, the upcoming meeting with Daniel's parents. Despite her love for Daniel, she knew little about his family's expectations or their values. Daniel had mentioned a few times that his parents, Vivian and Charles, were strict and opinionated, particularly about whom their children chose to marry. This made Amara worry, especially knowing they came from a world of privilege that valued status and wealth. Daniel reassured her, saying he'd protect her from any judgment, but she still felt anxious. While she was proud of her adoptive parents' success and wealth, Amara had chosen not to tell Daniel's family about it. She wanted them to appreciate her for who she was, not for her background. The idea of being evaluated based on her family's standing unsettled her. Daniel's insistence on waiting until they were both established in their careers before introducing her also hinted that he was nervous about his family's approval. To ease her anxiety, Amara decided to keep their engagement a secret from Daniel's parents initially, hoping it would give them a chance to know her without added pressure. She was determined to make a great impression, to show them her genuine self. However, the fear of rejection remained in the back of her mind. Amara worried about how they would perceive her past and if they would ever see her as worthy of being part of their family. Still, she reminded herself of Daniel's love and their commitment, hoping it would be strong enough to overcome any obstacle they might face. The day had finally come for Amara to meet Daniel's family, and though she tried to stay calm, anxiety gnawed at her. They had agreed to meet Vivian and Charles at an upscale restaurant. Daniel held Amara's hand tightly as they walked in, sensing her unease. Amara wore a simple but elegant dress and had her engagement ring tucked away on a chain around her neck, just in case. She wanted everything to go perfectly. When they arrived, she immediately noticed the tense expressions on Vivian and Charles's faces. They looked her up and down, their scrutiny sharp and disapproving. Amara greeted them warmly, trying to mask her nerves, but the atmosphere remained cold. To make matters worse, they were 2 minutes late, which Daniel had warned her could irritate his punctual parents. She quickly realized they had already started judging her. As they all took their seats, Vivian and Charles barely acknowledged her, focusing their attention on Daniel. They laughed and chatted with him as if Amara weren't there. She felt invisible, trying to join the conversation only to be met with dismissive glances. After what felt like an eternity, Daniel, sensing her discomfort, gently interjected, "Mom, Dad, I'd like you to meet Amara, my wonderful girlfriend." "Oh, hello," Vivian replied with a forced smile. "So, Amara, I hear you and Daniel met in college?" "Yes, we did," Amara responded, smiling despite the tension. "We happened to share some classes together." Vivian raised an eyebrow. "And how did you manage to attend this college?" "From what I know, it's quite exclusive." Her tone was cold, bordering on disdain. Daniel quickly interjected, "Mom, please." But Charles interrupted Daniel, "Don't interrupt. Amara, we're just curious." Amara took a deep breath. "I received a full scholarship, which I'm very grateful for. Not only did I get a great education, but I also got to meet Daniel, which has been one of the best things to happen to me." "Oh, I'm sure it has," Vivian replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I mean, who wouldn't want someone as successful as Daniel?" The conversation grew more strained as Charles and Vivian made underhanded comments about Amara's background, as if her worth was tied to her financial standing. By the end of the evening, she felt humiliated. As they left, Daniel apologized profusely, furious with his parents for their treatment of her. Amara, though hurt, tried to keep her composure, hoping it had simply been a bad first impression. Following the uncomfortable first meeting, Amara continued to feel isolated in Daniel's world. She attended more gatherings and events with his family, each time hoping to be accepted, but each time left feeling more alone. Vivian and Charles made little effort to welcome her, often brushing her off or engaging only with Daniel as if she were invisible. At larger gatherings, she felt the weight of their silent judgment, as if her every move was being evaluated and found lacking. As much as Daniel tried to stand by her, the pressure of his family's disapproval weighed on him. His parents' influence seemed to creep into their private lives. He became more distant, his frustration occasionally spilling over into their conversations. He defended her when things were particularly tense but became visibly uncomfortable when his family questioned her background or her suitability as his partner. Amara began to feel like an outsider in her own relationship, unsure of where she stood with the man she loved. Amara's efforts to blend in with his family, dressing conservatively, politely laughing at their jokes, and carefully avoiding controversial topics, went unnoticed. Even at family gatherings where she tried to engage in small talk or compliment his parents, she was met with cold indifference. Over time, her sense of self-worth began to erode, replaced by the growing anxiety of never being good enough for their standards. The more she tried to fit into their world, the more isolated she felt. The painful reality settled in. Daniel's family didn't care about who she was or the love she shared with him. They saw her as an outsider, a liability to their image. Amara began to wonder if their love was enough to bridge the gap between her values and the superficial world Daniel's family lived in. The anniversary party hosted by Daniel's parents was supposed to be a celebration, but for Amara, it quickly became a humiliating ordeal. Though she had hoped Vivian and Charles might finally show some warmth, their icy behavior was on full display. Amara arrived with Daniel, but from the moment they entered, she was overlooked by nearly everyone in the room. She tried to make small talk, only to be met with disinterested looks or dismissive glances, leaving her feeling invisible. As the evening wore on, Vivian and Charles gave a speech to thank everyone in attendance. Amara stood close by Daniel, trying to maintain her composure. However, as they spoke, the couple began making pointed jokes about certain people who had joined their family, people who, in their words, would never truly understand the importance of legacy and status. Each jab felt like a knife, cutting into Amara's dignity as laughter rippled through the guests. When Vivian glanced her way with a thinly veiled smirk, Amara could no longer hold back her tears. She quietly excused herself and left the room, her heart pounding with a mixture of hurt and shame. She ordered an Uber, fleeing the party alone. By the time Daniel returned home, he was furious, not at his parents, but at her. He accused her of embarrassing him, adding that she should have endured the evening for his sake. In that moment, Amara felt utterly betrayed. Daniel, who had once promised to stand by her, had chosen his family's approval over her dignity. Their love, once a source of strength, now felt hollow. This was the breaking point, and Amara knew she could no longer ignore the painful reality of her situation. Feeling isolated and defeated after the anniversary party, Amara reached out to the two people who had always supported her, Grace and Henry, her adoptive parents. During their video call, they immediately noticed her sadness, and she found herself unable to hold back the tears as she recounted the ongoing disrespect from Daniel's family. She told them about Vivian and Charles's snide remarks and how Daniel had accused her of embarrassing him by leaving the party. Grace and Henry listened patiently, anger flashing across their faces as they absorbed her pain. "Honey, you don't deserve to be treated this way," her mother said firmly. "You are more than enough just as you are, and if they can't see that, it's their loss." Amara felt a weight lift as her parents offered their unconditional support. Henry, usually the calm and diplomatic one, was visibly upset. "We'll be visiting next week," he said, "and perhaps it's time we make some things clear to Daniel's family." For the first time in weeks, Amara felt a spark of hope. She didn't need to face this alone. Her parents had her back. The call ended with Grace and Henry reassuring her that she was loved and valued. Buoyed by their words, Amara found the strength to prepare for what lay ahead, feeling ready to stand up for herself, no matter the cost. The next week, Amara's parents, Grace and Henry, arrived in town. She felt an overwhelming sense of relief as they embraced her, reassuring her that everything would be okay. Grace and Henry had a quiet confidence, and their strength fortified Amara as they prepared to confront Daniel's family. Coincidentally, the weekly family dinner was scheduled at an upscale restaurant that Friday, and Amara's parents decided it was time to make their presence known. As Daniel, Vivian, Charles, and other family members settled at the table, Grace and Henry walked into the dining room. Vivian's eyes widened in recognition. Henry was a well-known figure in business circles. A hush fell over the table as they approached, and Amara felt a surge of pride seeing her parents command the room's attention. "Good evening," Henry said, his voice calm but firm. "We wanted to join you this evening since we hear so much about these family dinners." Vivian forced a polite smile, clearly uncomfortable. "Mr. and Mrs. Lane, we weren't expecting you," she stammered. "Clearly," Grace replied, her voice laced with steel. She turned to Daniel, who looked as if he wished he could disappear. "Amara has shared a lot about how she's been treated here, and we thought it was time to meet the people who've taken such an interest in her background." Charles stiffened, and his tone was defensive. "Well, as her family, we naturally have high standards for anyone joining us." "High standards," Henry repeated, raising an eyebrow. "If standards include cruelty and snobbery, then you certainly excel." Vivian glanced at Amara with a mix of irritation and embarrassment. "Amara never told us about her background, which would have made a difference." "Did she need to?" Grace interjected, her gaze unwavering. "She wanted you to accept her for who she is. That's more than enough for us, and it should be for you too." Henry reached into his coat pocket, pulling out an envelope and handing it to Daniel. "These are divorce papers. My daughter deserves respect, and if she can't get it here, she'll find it elsewhere." Stunned silence followed as Daniel opened the envelope. Vivian's mouth opened, but no words came out. With quiet dignity, Grace and Henry took Amara's hand and led her out of the restaurant, leaving Daniel's family speechless. For the first time in months, Amara felt a sense of closure and peace. Walking away from the toxic environment with her parents at her side, she knew she'd made the right choice. With her parents' support, Amara walked away from her marriage feeling both heartache and relief. She had loved Daniel deeply, but his family's constant judgment and his unwillingness to defend her had left wounds too deep to ignore. The final confrontation with his parents had shown her that self-respect mattered more than clinging to a love that no longer uplifted her. She knew now that true family wasn't defined by blood but by those who stood by her, no matter what. As the weeks passed, Amara began to rebuild her life, surrounded by the love and encouragement of her adoptive parents, Grace and Henry. They reminded her of her worth, helping her see the strength she'd gained from this painful experience. Though letting go of Daniel was difficult, she felt a newfound confidence blossoming within her, a resilience forged through hardship and self-discovery. Reflecting on her journey, Amara realized she had learned invaluable lessons about standing up for herself and refusing to be diminished by others' expectations. Her future, once shadowed by doubt, now seemed bright and full of promise. With her parents by her side, she was ready to face whatever life held next, grateful for their unwavering support and the inner strength she had found. As she looked ahead, Amara knew she could embrace a life filled with self-respect, joy, and the assurance that she would never settle for less than she deserved.